Morning. I'm going to talk about pedestrian issues from kind of a big level kind of point of view. What do we need to be doing when we're doing a work zone and we're looking at pedestrians that need to go through that? And what I'm going to be speaking from is really a project that was sponsored by the Texas Department of Transportation, and they wanted us to look at how we could improve their guidelines and really help ADA fit into those guidelines. And I'm not going to address the ADA portion of this so much. I'm going to let Janet handle that and not steal her thunder. And so I'm going to talk just mostly about when you're going out to do a work zone, what do we need to be doing or thinking about? As part of this project, we developed what I call a checklist, and this really defines if you have sidewalks within the limits of your project and you know there's potential for traffic of pedestrians going through that project, what do you then need to do? And it goes through it in 4 phases. It starts with feasibility and project assessment. That's really more the design side of things. What does the designer need to be doing as they go into this process and start thinking about pedestrians at the very first step of the project? But what I'm really going to talk about today are these last 2 phases. And these are more the construction side of things. Okay, we know we're going to do a project. What do we need to do in the interim to try and help pedestrians get through here? So that starts with traffic control plan development, making sure pedestrian issues are considered in that. And once they've been considered into that plan, reviewing what's happening in the field, because we all know work zones are a very dynamic situation. And so to continue to look at these things and to make sure that we're considering how we're affecting pedestrians by what we're doing day to day. So when we started to look at the temporary traffic control plans for the pedestrians, we started with the manual for uniform traffic control devices. And it really gives 3 points when you're trying to talk about what do I need to do with pedestrians. The first 2 might seem real natural, like a duh kind of a moment. Don't lead them into conflicts with the vehicles. Don't lead them into conflicts with the work or the work equipment. And so you want to make sure that they have their own designated area. That seems like a simple enough task when you say it that way, but it really is very complex what you need to consider when you're doing that. The third thing then is that the path should provide a safe, convenient, and accessible route for these pedestrians. And so we need to start thinking about how is the change that we're making affecting the safety of that person? How is it affecting the accessibility of all people who want to use that route? And really start making sure that that path that you're providing during the work has the same features of the path as close as practical that you have day to day through there. Because the same people who are using it every day are going to want to use it during your work. So as we start to think about that, the first issue that really comes up is where are we going to put people during the work? Can we keep them on their same route, or do we need to close the sidewalk for some reason? Are we reconstructing the entire right-of-way so the sidewalk's going to be closed? Is it possible to keep them on the same side of the road as they've been? Can we put them in a parking area? Can we build a temporary walkway for them? Is there some way so you're not having to take that person out of their comfort area or take them out of their way to get to where they want to be? That's the convenient part of it. We don't want people to have to go above and beyond what they were normally planning to do. And then the third thing is, okay, we need to close down this entire side, so where are we going to take them? Is it another street? Is it another path? Or is it the opposite sidewalk? You know, one nice thing about pedestrians is you have that real convenient alternate route right across the street. And so we need to consider how we're going to do that. And there's a lot of points that once you have to take that person off their expected route, what we need to do. So we've decided that we're going to put them closer to traffic maybe, closer to the work. So when you start considering that you need to put people in a situation, maybe where they're using the parking lane or the street lane, you've got to put them closer to traffic than they were before. So that's impacting their safety. There's no longer that natural divide, maybe a curb line or a shoulder or a grassy area between that sidewalk and the traffic. So now how are we going to create a safe haven for those pedestrians when they're in the actual travel lane for the vehicles? We need to start thinking about barrier separation between them and the vehicles. You can see our nice cute little graphic here. It looks a little funny when you think about it, but you don't want that vehicle to be able to come through whatever your barrier separation is. We need to make sure that it's crash worthy, that it's going to allow people to feel comfortable walking in that area, and that you're going to be able to make this accessible for people and not just an afterthought. It's the same with the work. We don't want people to be able to have the need to walk through our work area. So we want to make sure that if it's a putting the people next to this that we're also providing some separation between these modes. Brings us to the third thing that I might think about, access. So we now close something off, and we need to make sure that we've got access to for the people to the places that they need to go. In this case, it was a crosswalk that's being closed. This is a nice example because there was another immediate crosswalk right there that the person could use to get around where they needed to go. We don't want to have them dead end into this crosswalk closed, and then where am I going? There's not another crosswalk here. I can't go across the street to that easy alternate route that we were talking about. So I'm going to have to back up and find something else, or I'm going to have to make an illegal move, and I'm just going to jump across the street, which we don't want to lead. That's leading somebody into conflict with vehicles. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we've thought about how is that person going to react and change their route based on the information, and how can we create access. Transit is another access issue. When you start talking about changing a road, maybe there's a transit or a bus lane or a bus route along that road. This is a picture that we took in one place. The bus route is actually still in the middle of the work zone. There's active work going on right there next to the bus stop, and this person back near the curb is waiting for that bus, trying to stay out of the work area, but he's going to have to cross that work area to get to the bus. So we've led them intentionally into a direct conflict with the work area. So we need to think about access to all these places that people are going to go. The third one is businesses. Have you allowed, if you had to take people off of their original route, have you allowed for how they're going to get back to the place where they need to be? I wanted to go to the doctor's office that was right over here. It's a half a block into the work zone. Have you allowed for that person's ability to get there as a pedestrian? In another case, it might be that the work isn't right next to the person. Maybe the work's above a person. If you're redoing a bridge, have you thought about what it could impact the people below you? Are there people walking underneath that bridge area where we need to start thinking about a canopied walkway or something like this? What are the considerations all around your work, not just immediately left and right of you, but you have to think about all of the dimensions of your work and how it's impacting the people who need to go through this area. So once you've decided on a path, you've found a good path for these people, what do we need that path to look like? Well, there's a width consideration. This would go back, obviously to the ADA issue and wheelchair access, but it also goes to your everyday person. What if I'm a mother with a stroller? How am I going to get through this now? You've been leading me down a path. It's a nice sidewalk width of a path, and all of a sudden it's halved. I can't go forward because I can't get past that, so I'm going to have to go backwards. You've led them into a situation where they can no longer progress along the path that you wanted them to. Surface is another thing. You saw surface change in that last one. It went from that nice concrete path to kind of a dirt drop-off where they were having to do some construction in that area. But anytime you're changing the surface area, you're creating a hazard for the walker who's going through this area. Maybe it's a person who's just not paying attention. Maybe it's a tripping hazard to them. Or maybe it's somebody who's elderly and can't navigate this type of a change in surface and a change in levels. So we need to consider, is the path I've provided accessible to the people that need it? Temporary obstructions. It seems like we want to get these out of the road so that they're not obstructing our drivers, but we also want to get them far enough away that they're not going to be in the way of our pedestrians. You've got this nice sign mounted with our little stick figure man. In one way, it's right in the pedestrian's head. We don't want somebody who's maybe can't see it, or maybe is listening to their iPod, they're not paying attention where they're going, all of a sudden to get bonked in the forehead with the point of that sign. That's not a great day for you. The lower picture shows another one. This is the open path, if you can see it right here. They can walk straight across, or they can walk and come across this crosswalk right here. So we've put some construction material now in the way of that pedestrian being able to navigate our path. We want to make sure that where we've put these obstacles is not only not in the way of the traffic, but is not in the way of your pedestrian traffic. Sight lines, just like the cars, the person needs to be able to see and make maneuvers. So if there's some sort of a barrier that's been put up, it's going to obstruct not just the view of these PED signals, but maybe the view of being able to make a safe crossing maneuver. You don't want somebody to have to step out into the street and have to look around your parked, dump truck or the crane that's standing there to be able to see if there's a car coming. We don't want somebody to have to make that unsafe maneuver that they have to step into traffic before they can even see what's safe or not safe on their path. So sight lines at a pedestrian level become a real issue of safety. Information needs. So some of these things can maybe be avoided through information needs. This is what I would call maybe a standard expectation of a closed sidewalk. You get to that point, somebody tells you the sidewalk's closed, and then that pedestrian has to make a choice. Is that what we would do for the vehicles? Would we take them halfway down the block before they got to the first warning sign that their road was closed and expect them to turn around or make a choice at that point? Or would we think about giving them some advanced warning, where they can maybe know ahead of time at the last safe crossing that they needed to get across the street because coming up, the sidewalk's closed? You see in the lower picture here, you can't see the work yet, but this is going to be the last safe crossing spot. So you want to tell people at this point, you need to do something here, and this is why you need to do it. In other cases, the sign might be right at the work. This upper right-hand picture, there was a crosswalk here where they could use this sidewalk and cross to the other side and use the opposite side. That's probably your better bet as far as your pedestrian compliance is concerned. They're going to look at that. They're going to say, yeah, I really need to do that. But we want to be sure that there's a way for them to do that. You don't want to lead them across the street where, again, there's no crosswalk or it's not accessible for people to cross. Third thing is guidance. Once you've taken them off of their expected path, you've taken them into an unfamiliar area. We want them to be able to navigate back to that familiar area. And so we need to provide them detour or further guidance signs that they can find their way back to where they want to be. So that leads us then into a construction in-field review. The best of plans never go the way we hope, do they? So once you get things out there, you need to keep looking at it and saying, are things happening the way that we expected them to happen? Construction changes every day. You typically go through a field review of your signs and all the barriers that you've got out for vehicles. We need to take that same consideration over to pedestrians. Once things have changed, once things start getting going with the construction, is everything in place that needs to be in place? They should be happening quite frequently because I think it's more prone that people will change something in a pedestrian area thinking, oh, I'm keeping it out of the driver's way, so it's safe now, and they're likely to put something in the driving path. And so you need to consider, what are you moving and where are you moving it to? How are you obstructing somebody besides the vehicles? So I'm going to go through some slides now, just look at some points of maybe what we should be looking for in in-field reviews. The first and biggest thing is, where were you intending for the pedestrians to go in your plan versus what are they actually doing in the field, and how can we make those two meet so that people are being led and where it's most convenient and most accessible to them. The first picture on the left looks great. They've provided this nice new sidewalk to lead them up around construction, but with that old sidewalk path there, it's a little bit confusing as to which one people should be on. Unfortunately, if you chose the left one, which was their old path, their original, what they expected to be doing, it's going to lead you right into this construction area. So maybe we needed some advanced warning back here to tell the person, hey, this old way that you've always walked for the last 5 years, you can't do that anymore. We need you to take this new route. On the right-hand side, it was a closure. Then once you get to this closure, here you don't have a crosswalk available. Your best option, maybe if you're a pedestrian, you're just looking at this, is to just kind of jog around it on the right, and you can see this yellow arrow leads you to a bicyclist that's chosen to do exactly that. Just kind of jog around it on the right and keep on going, and that's probably good for a lot of us, but it's unfortunately leading into two things. You're leaving that nice flat surface that you can walk on, so you're actually taking away some of the accessibility of this area, and you're also leading into danger with the work that's going on to the right, because in this case, it's actually building construction to the right. And so we don't want to lead somebody into an unsafe area when they're going through these paths. So maybe something else needed to be done upstream to get all these people out of the way. Again, advanced warning to make sure that they don't get to this point. Transition points is another place where things can easily get undone. You're going from this nice original sidewalk here where you were intended to walk, and all of a sudden, because of this excavation here, there's dirt, there's asphalt, there's broken up concrete. How can we fix that surface to still make this our accessible path? Is that possible? it just be cleaned up? Is there some asphalt that could be brought in? How are we going to do this so that it can still be accessible? Or if we can't, where are we going to take those pedestrians? How do we change our plan? This plan might have to change midstream based on what has to be done during the construction. Information at transition points. This looks pretty good. I mean, you just come across the street, you've got this nice sidewalk closed, they're warning you about it. Unfortunately, there's no crosswalk there for the person to be able to take a right turn and go across the street. So what is this person now going to have to do? They either have to remember, it's not safe for me to cross where there isn't a crosswalk, where I'm having to go through the work zone in order to get across the street, or they're going to have to turn around, back up, go back across the street, and make that maneuver, because back away across the street on the opposite side is where the crosswalks are. You might think, you can see this from across the street, but how many of us walk every day, we're talking on our cell phone, we're doing something else, we're looking at papers, you don't realize it until maybe you're halfway over there, that you're not going to be able to continue. So we want to make sure there's warning at their side where you could actually get this information to people where they needed it. We don't want people to have to back up along their path. I don't want my car to have to get halfway down the block and back up, my person to get halfway and back up. Barriers when they're needed. This is a nice line of barricades that they've provided. They want the pedestrian to come off of their sidewalk, and it's actually going out into the street. And there's fence on the left between them and construction, and barricades between them and the right on the traffic side. Unfortunately, this isn't providing the positive protection between them and the traffic. If some car isn't paying attention and they start running into these barrels, there's nothing there that's going to keep that car from running into the pedestrian. And so we haven't created the safe way for them that we need to. This is another instance where barriers were put up in this case, and these are both pictures of the same work zone. So this barrier wall right here is the front side of this barrier wall right here. Pedestrian traffic wasn't intended to go back through this area, but unfortunately up at the front end of that barrier wall where it comes to an intersection, there's nothing to prevent them from going through this area. So people are using this as a route underneath this bridge. Instead of crossing the street and using the opposite side, they're using this side because it's accessible. We need to figure out how can we keep people from there, or if people are going to use that, how can we make that safe for them? So it's one of two considerations. Once you find that people are going where you don't want them, why? Because there was nothing preventing that, and there was no clear information that they shouldn't. And then how do we fix that? So once you've got your path in place, we really need to look at what's happening in place. This is a case where, again, the intended path was just to keep going on this sidewalk. No work was being done on the sidewalks in this job. Unfortunately, because of the way that the equipment had to be used, this path is now not accessible. So the devices we had in place aren't appropriate to the situation. How are we going to change that? This is leading them into conflict with the vehicles because they actually have to come out of their safe crossing zone in order to get out into traffic to make this crossing maneuver. So we've got to take them to a different route, or we've got to see how could we reposition this construction so it's not disturbing the pedestrian route. This is another device that's in place. This one looks pretty good. You're approaching it, and it says to use the south sidewalk. I would have an argument with south, just saying that most people don't know which direction is their south when they're walking. I don't know what direction I'm facing right now. So it's an information change maybe, but the bigger thing in this picture is that the intended sidewalk is right here, and they would normally come here and then take a right up that sidewalk. So if you get that close to this, this is what it looks like. Maybe this is overkill. Bigger is not always better for providing information to people. We maybe need to think about downsizing this to just a sign that says sidewalk closed, use other side, in order to get this pedestrian traffic to do what we wanted them to. Because most pedestrians are not going to be able to read this as they're walking by, and they're also not going to maybe think it's for them. How often do you see changeable message signs used as pedestrian guidance? This was my first time, I can tell you that. So it's not maybe what they're looking for. So bigger isn't always better. We need to think about what we're trying to do. Clear paths is another thing. We all think about getting things out of the road so that they're not in the driver's way. We don't want it to get kicked up by a driver. But a lot of times then it gets deposited on the sidewalk or in the pedestrian area. So you don't want to have these construction materials or the down sign over on this side in the way of the driver. Unfortunately, on this side too, we have some drainage issues. So the portion where we want the pedestrian to be walking maybe is muddy. So we don't want people to have to go through that type of a situation. You don't want to lead them into this type of a situation where it may be inaccessible depending on your level of walking. It's not skill, isn't the word I'm looking for, but your abilities, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. Again, the sign, it's perfect. It's out of the vehicle way, but it's right in the middle of the pedestrian way. It's reducing that pedestrian way by half. So if I'm a larger wheelchair, stroller, something that's going down this way, I'm not going to have enough room there. What am I going to do? Do I have to use the street now? I've been led into conflict with vehicles. So conflict with the vehicle can be much bigger than just having somebody intentionally walk in the street. Again, there was access. I spoke to both of these points when I was in that first half of it. Well, we have to remember to go back and evaluate. Maybe we forgot there was a bus route here. We need to make sure now and go back and change that plan so that it meets the situation that actually is happening in the field. Another thing about access that I didn't hit on before is construction vehicle access. How are your construction vehicles getting maybe from where you keep them at night out into the construction area? In this case, it was going straight across the pedestrian path, so there was a lot of dirt that had been deposited on this path by those vehicles going back and forth. There's also a lot of traffic going back and forth. So you have a conflict between your work vehicles and your pedestrians. How can we solve this? Can we change where those vehicles are being placed? Can we change where the pedestrians are moving? I've made a lot of points, showed a lot of different things here, but I think the main things to remember are just that when you start looking at that path, it needs to be continuous and it needs to be accessible. We don't want to lead somebody halfway to some point and then not for them to be able to get the rest of the way there. It's no different than your vehicle. You don't want them to get to a closed road at the closure and not be able to get where they're going. We want to give them good information before they get there so that they can make that maneuver. And this comes through planning beforehand and in field review, looking at what's happening in our conditions. And so if you think of that pedestrian as you're making these plans and making these reviews, as you would a motorist or a vehicle, you'll start to be able to see, I think, what am I doing to this person that I wouldn't do for the vehicle? Am I making them go someplace? Am I making them walk into a ditch? I wouldn't expect the vehicle to drive off into a ditch to avoid my lane closure. I would expect that I would give them another lane they can use. I wouldn't expect that my vehicle would get halfway down the block before they see the closure. I would give them someplace else to go, a detour route, and I would lead them on that route. So we've got to think about it in the big picture of how we're going to accommodate the pedestrians. I just have two references I'm going to show you here before I get done. This is where I took most of what I've said here today is out of this document. It's called Checklist for Accommodating Pedestrians and Temporary Traffic Control. And it's available online as a PDF. And it's really a list. This is the long format of it where you can see there's topics to be considered and then points under each of those topics. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about the second thing? And on the right-hand side, there's a lot of reference. Why we've put these points in here. Is it from the MUTCD? Is it from other documents dealing with pedestrians? And so all of that is in there. There's also a short form of it that takes away all that reference and just gives you the topics, and maybe you can take those out with you. And the second document is a fuller version of the work we did in this project, which includes some more ADA issues, and it includes some pedestrian signing information that I think is very vital. So these are two different documents that if you want some more information, you can go to.